The next surge of polar air continues moving into the central part of the country, and it's a late show, so we're going to see a little bit of infrared imagery here. There's the infrared imagery with color enhancement. The purple is going to be an intermediate color, about 0 to minus 20 Celsius, and the blues and greens, that's getting into the much colder temperatures. That's going to correspond to the mid and upper level cloudiness. We'll head right into that surface chart. There's the next blast of cold air coming out of central Canada. Remember yesterday, that was coming out of Alberta and entering Montana. So in 24 hours, all the way down into Illinois and into Oklahoma. Temperature's not that cold back behind it compared to what we usually see in December, January. Up there in North Dakota, looks like 11, 12, 9 degrees. And about the coldest that we're seeing up there in Canada is about 1 degree. Down to the south, though, we've got our transitional air mass. This is from the last round of cold weather, and that original front is way down there in the tropics. Got that gap wind blowing through Mexico, and on the other side, I'm not sure if I can see that, but there is some downslope warming. Quite often they get temperatures in the 90s on the lee side due to adiabatic warming. And then taking a look up there in the western U.S., the cold air also intruding into Oregon and Washington. There's those easterly winds at Portland with gusts to 39 knots. So that's a gap wind as well. This is a topographic map from one of my upcoming books, showing that canyon area just east of Portland. This is the Columbia River Basin, this is Washington, and that's Oregon. And what we're having is that cold air flowing through these passes, channeling through the Columbia River Basin and accelerating as it moves into the lower elevations. And there's the surface data for that area. You can see it's very localized. The airport at Portland, 26 gusting to 39. I don't know if Troutdale is in there. Yeah, there it is. They've got 16 gusting to 21, and not much further to the east, just 5 knots. So there's the upper air chart for this evening. Broad westerly flow across much of the country, and north winds in Canada driving that air mass southward. A classic omega block out there in Alaska. See that? It resembles the Greek letter omega. Got that cutoff high right there in the center, and that tends to block up the pattern temporarily. So we've got a jet coming around the backside that's going to dive south, and once that's clear, we should start seeing an improvement in the weather across much of the country. But for the next 3 days, it's going to be cold and kind of unsettled. We'll just kind of run this forward and let you take a look at the progression of the waves. You can see that we start reverting to a zonal pattern. We've talked about that positive EPO pattern, and that's going to be related to the flow between this area here in Alaska and the tropics down south. These are directly north and south, so that gives you an idea of the east-west component through that gate. That's measured at 500 millibars. That's a little bit below this level, but this works okay for that. And we can see that EPO pattern setting up and bringing the atmospheric rivers into the eastern U.S. or the western U.S. There's one wave. There's a second wave slowing down as that trough there deepens, and we get to the end and a little bit of ridging across much of the country, but things seem to be progressing west to east as we move into the last week of November. So let's go ahead and run through the charts. This is the forecast sequence from the GFS. I'm using the surface winds, the surface pressure in black, and the red lines are the 1,000 through 700 millibar thickness. That's related to the temperature between the surface and 10,000 feet. So that's good for tracking your air masses. So let's take a look here. There's that cold air mass moving into the Rockies, into Oklahoma, and into Missouri. There's the old outgoing high. Here's the new one. So we go forward, and there comes the cold air sneaking into Texas, and we're starting to get some upslope flow in Texas. Easterly wind right through here. And that's going to help sustain the clouds and any precip that happens to be in the area. In the Great Lakes region, westerlies, but it's a cold westerly flow. The thermal trough located right through here, that's going to be the core of the cold air. And of course, we can see by the wind field that's going to be spreading to the east. But here's the second chunk in the Rockies, and that's going to be kind of anchored in the valleys, but it still has considerable depth, so we're going to be contending with that for a while. And plus, the pressures are pretty high up there at 1040, so that's not going away anytime soon. Going into tomorrow and tomorrow night, plenty of cold air on hand across the north-central U.S., and we see what appears to be another shortwave working down associated with this troughing across the Dakotas and a bit of a Alberta clipper right in that area. And you can see that move into Iowa and Illinois on Saturday, and with that a push of cold air in its wake. So Saturday will be quite cold across the Great Lakes region. The conditions are moderating in Texas. Calm winds, modification of the air mass from the bottom up, and we see some lee-side troughing start to reestablish itself over the high plains. And you can see that old plateau high continuing to sit there over the Snake River Valley. Let's take a look at those temperatures for tomorrow morning. We see a few more records popping up. That's due to the Weather Service forecasters reevaluating things and seeing a tiny bit more aerial extent that appears to be mostly in Idaho. These we've been looking at for the past several days, not unexpected, and those readings are well below zero. For Saturday, strong radiational cooling affecting Idaho, so they will set some records. For Sunday, some records popping up in the Midwest. On Monday, things moderate. You can see how the cold air continues shifting to the east, and some remains anchored there in Idaho. Continuing that moderation for Tuesday, and we return to seasonal normals. No problems on Wednesday. If anything, warm weather in the Florida Keys. And no records on Thursday either. And with that increased positive EPO, the negative PNA pattern setting up, that's going to curb the supply of Arctic air. So I think as we go into the last half of next week, I think the main issue that we're going to be watching is precipitation out west as those waves make their way onto the coast. And we'll need to stop for now as it's getting quite late. We'll be back tomorrow for a more comprehensive edition of Forecast Lab. Hope we'll see you then. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.